And Dr. Luana, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Zarka. Thank you for this introduction. And it's a great pleasure to be here in this panel. I want to congratulate Kata Foundation, congratulate Dr. Amal, congratulate you, Zarka, and the panelists, and thank you so much for everybody who is connected for being here. About myself, I have to confess that I am a data and patterns aficionate. You know, I love data and patterns, and one thing that perhaps data from, with data you can uncover the problems and the root causes of those problems, and with patterns you can understand predictions, and with predictions you can better devise solutions for those problems. And one thing that really caught my attention right after the aftermath of the death of the killing of George Floyd was that there was no really sound coming from the private sector and any institutions in the Gulf. In the same time that all over the world you were hearing commitments, pledges, against racism and discrimination. And from the Gulf, I heard a complete silence. And I'm sorry, perhaps, if because of the little Arabic, I might not have heard, but in general, we have not heard much from this region. And I think part of that is that belief that that's not a problem for the region. It's a US problem, it's an American problem. And I think one thing that I want to start talking about is about the biases that we all have. And we have to face it. We all have biases. I just want to ask you a few questions to illustrate this assertion that I'm making. And I ask these questions to everybody I come in contact who tells me that they do not see color or that people are people. And I ask them, who do you think earns more, a doctor or a teacher? And they say, a doctor, you should earn more. Who do you think earns more, a doctor or a janitor? A doctor. A janitor or a teacher, and go on, it depends, okay, no, but it must be the teacher. And then I ask, a black doctor or a white teacher? And I hear a pause. And then I continue, a black doctor or a white janitor? A pause. And this pause it happens in practically 100% of times they hear this question. Sometimes it's a really lengthy pause. And that pause is what we call in applied social science and social science implicit bias. We all have it. And that bias, that pause, happens only because I put the word black or white in front of occupation. That pause is a discount. That pause is our belief systems. That pause could be ignorance, but that pause is prejudice. So these unwarranted discounts, either by the individual or by an entire society and its institutions about the true worth of a group of people, about their beauty, about their intelligence, about their character. And when one race does it to another, it's called racism. So these unwarranted discounts are very costly to societies. Costly because they limit educational and economic opportunities of whole parts of a society and a population, and have negative consequences in the long run on aggregate savings, on investment. McKinsey, for example, estimates that systematic racial economic differences may cost up to 6% of the US GDP. And why do I say unwarranted? Some may ask. Because most of the time, when we look at data, we realize that prejudices are incorrect beliefs about people. Let me give you an example. In Brazil, 70% of garbage collectors are black, okay? And 96% of the executives in the top 500 companies are white. There is a huge social divide that is marked, obviously, by race, okay? But a lot of people in the society believe that to overcome this divide, that this divide can be overcome by effort, by hard work, by merit, implying that one group, maybe that's what is lacking, and that's why they are where they are. And that if they were to invest and acquire education, that would destroy all racial, economic inequalities. But what we find when we look at data is that a black woman with a PhD earns on average 50% less than a white woman with a PhD. And what we actually find with data is that the racial wage gap actually increases with education. So let's face it, as you are biased, knowingly or unknowingly, okay? The studies show that biases in judgment will eventually lead you to discriminate against a particular group at some point in your life. So what I advise governments to do, and believe me, I have advised several governments in Brazil, Colombia, Panama, Chile, Trinidad, among many others. What I tell them is simply to stop being like the ostrich. Stop burying your head in the ground and leaving your whole body exposed. By avoiding to talk about race is not gonna make racism go away. The first step is to collect and analyze data. Administrative data, survey data. The EU just had their survey about the black experience, being black in Europe, a few years ago. And yes, racism is pervasive there too. Just to give you an idea, 63% of minority population in Finland experience racism, 52% in Luxembourg, 51% in Ireland, 48% in Denmark and Italy. Now they are discussing what should we do to fight racism. Let's do something about it after they collected the data. So understand the problem, understand the existing biases in society, deter racism in the institutions by understanding the mechanisms. So through data collection and analysis, institutions will come to realize that their traditions and practices can have unintended effects and can produce racially disproportionate outcomes. So efforts need to be intensified because people are not taking anymore. The Arab Spring, the Black Lives Matter movement are society's expression of enough. The BLM has undoubtedly shaped the way America views racial inequality in the last 5 years. The Black movement in Brazil was detrimental in changing how Black Brazilians view themselves, love themselves, accept themselves, and in removing the blindfold so people could see that actually in Brazil we never lived in a racial paradise. So grassroots movements like the BLM effectively engaging social media mark a new chapter in the centuries of struggle for Black liberation. What BLM was able to actually beautifully achieve and do was to unite human rights groups, different human rights groups, for the full recognition of Blacks' rights as citizens all over the world. So moving forward, Blacks will continue to stand up, united, occupying online and offline spaces of speech and action, just like this one. Qatar has been ahead of its time and its peers in the GCC in many fronts. This could just be one more opportunity and chapter in which it will show how to tackle prejudice, racism, discrimination in the context of the Gulf. There are policies that can remedy incorrect beliefs and discomfort, this discomfort that we have with the topic. But we must start early with our children. Early because racism starts very early too. So there are policies to remedy unfair treatment in institutions and institutional racism, but data needs to be collected, research needs to be developed. So you might be thinking, oh, Brazil has data, US has data, and yet racism is a commonplace in those places. Data alone will not solve all our problems. But without it, there is nothing to guide leaders who are willing to address these challenges. Every person, business, government must decide for themselves whether or not they are ready to face full head-on. I think this event is a great opportunity to open the curtain and to have a candid conversation about it, to recognize that we all have very dangerous biases, and to become fully persuaded in his or his own mind that by dealing with those biases, we can destroy them. So in your own mind, you need to become persuaded to deal with it. So there is an Igbo saying that says, he who holds himself, he who holds me to the ground holds himself. So let's all get out from the ground and stand up tall against racism and discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Luana, for the very interesting discussion and for talking to us about the power of data and the importance of research as well as grassroots movements. Many lessons to learn, and I hope we can implement some of those in the near future. And now, a reminder to the audience, you are able to ask us questions by posting your questions in the Q&A section on your right side, on the right side of the window.